Hi guys, cost of living. This seems to be the headline in all of the news channels and newspapers and everything at the moment. So it's worth looking at how is that impacting motorists and drivers. Is it? Well, of course it is. I'm sitting in a 5-litre Mustang right now and certainly impacts me when I have to go to the petrol station, which is far too frequent in this car, let's be honest. But hey ho, it's a Mustang V8. Can't complain, can you? But anyway, it's always good to look at data and research. So Kwik, the tire place, the servicing place, they've done some research. They've surveyed their drivers and they've come up with the fact that 70% of drivers say that their motoring habits have been affected by the cost of living. Over a third, that's 33%, have said that they have cut down on non-essential car journeys. And to be honest, like I've heard that a lot from people where, you know, people are thinking, do I really need to go out and do that? Do I really need to make that journey? They're maybe not driving for fun anymore as maybe they used to. And they're thinking about doing things like combining journeys. So it's like, okay, well, I've got to go there. Can I do that other thing as well at the same time so that I can save on the cost of the journey? Those driving petrol or diesel cars are twice as likely to have cut down compared to drivers of electric or hybrid cars. So this is quite interesting, and I think particularly the case with plug-in hybrids, because you know with plug-in hybrids you can get away without using any petrol at all if you're very clever. Typically, they say that in the UK the average commute per day is only 23 miles. Most plug-in hybrids have an electric range of 20 to 30, in some cases 40 miles. So theoretically you could get away with, if you keep it plugged in at home, if that's convenient for you, you could get away without using the petrol at all. It just stays in the tank, you know. But even with hybrids, it cuts it down because a hybrid obviously only uses the petrol to charge up the batteries. And electric cars, of course, that talks for itself. Of course, you know, this I don't think has taken into account the higher costs for electricity. Of course, that's a big thing right now. That's a big question mark as well, and those bills are skyrocketing and are set to go even higher. So maybe electric cars aren't necessarily the answer, and maybe this is a perception thing where people think, well, I'm not having to fuel the car and pay at the pump, so you know that's a bill that will come later. Be wary of that. Just be wary of that. Driving style. So 21% of drivers say that they have consciously changed their driving style. And it's interesting because I think I did something recently and I put out about how to be more economical, and it was about being smoother and all the rest of it. And sure enough, people are driving more smoothly, less aggressively. This is what they're saying, especially those driving EVs and hybrids is what it says in the survey. But I think people driving EVs and hybrids were already quite gentle, weren't they? Because if you drive an electric car too hard, you will run out the range very quickly. And similarly with a hybrid, you don't want to do that either. But now I think even with petrol cars, it's difficult though, because if you're in something like this, I mean, I do that thing where I skip a gear, so I'll go from first to third and stuff like that to try and save fuel. But the temptation to punch it in that first gear and that second gear is just too strong in this car because it just sounds great and it's just such a thrill. 14% say that they drive more slowly. That's interesting. Were they driving too fast before? I mean, you can only drive. Remember, there is especially because they say, especially the figure rises, that 14% number rises for longer journeys. By longer journeys, I'm assuming that means motorways. So you'll be driving too slow, you become a moving obstacle or a moving obstruction. And similarly around town, you got to be wary of that. Although, you know, some places around here, there's a 20 miles per hour limit, which feels like walking speed in this car. But there you go. It is what it is, right? Many drivers of EVs and hybrids have recently switched from diesel or petrol. And you know, this is proven, in fact, that more, for example, there's another stat, not from them, but from somewhere else that I know about, that more EVs were sold in March of this year. More EVs were sold in March of this year than the whole of 2019. Oh, EVs are happening. EVs are now really happening big time, and they're becoming a thing. Sales of EVs are more than doubled in the first quarter of this year. So you can see the changes happening. So 17% of drivers saying that they've switched to EVs and hybrids from petrol or diesel. More radical than that, 4% said that they just simply got rid of their cars. This is interesting. This is really interesting because as the pandemic hit, and we saw the repercussions of the pandemic in terms of people didn't want to share spaces with other people, which meant that the usage of public transport went way, way, way down. Of course, people stopped traveling, but also people were reluctant to jump on trains and buses and what have you. What that meant, and what I actually predicted, and I wasn't wrong, I was right, was a renaissance or a resurgence in interest in driving and car ownership. And of course, more people were taking up driving and more people were buying cars. That has seen prices go up both for new cars and used cars, and there's still a solid demand demand for cars, even though sales are low, production numbers are low, simply because they can't build the cars, because they haven't got the resources, they haven't got the materials that they need to do that, primarily chips, and now actually steel and aluminium as well, because of the war in Ukraine. So from going from that, where there was a lot of interest in cars, it seems that now we've got to a point where we're flipping around the other way again, and 4% are saying, well, they just got rid of their car because, you know, it's just costing too much money. So they're like, why should we bother to do that? Now, this is particularly true of younger drivers, those that are under 35 years old, simply because the cost of ownership, the cost of driving them, the cost of insuring them is so prohibitively high now. It's a whole different ballgame to when I first started driving, that's for sure. So I can't really blame them. And particularly if you live in an urban area, so there's good public transport, like here, I'm 5 minutes away from the local tube station. I can be in central London in 20 minutes. If I choose to drive there, forget about it. I have to pay congestion charging. I have to pay ULEZ if the car doesn't qualify. Then I have to pay for parking. Then I have to suffer the traffic to get in and out. It's at least an hour and a half to get in and out. Why would I do that? I'd just take the train, right? So understandably, in London alone, 10% of drivers have basically got rid of their car and not bought another one, just to cut down on their cost, because they're thinking, well, why do we need it? You know, and if you think about the cost of not only driving a car, running a car in London, but also parking it and keeping it and maintaining it, it's like, you know, wow, you'd be looking at a significant savings. So you can't really blame them, although the car guy side of me is sad to see that, but yeah, I can understand why that's happening. With traffic in 2021, actually, so this was traffic last year, you can say kind of post-pandemic-ish, you know, that actually exceeded pre-pandemic levels. So that actually tallies with what I was saying earlier, where more people during the pandemic, during lockdown, thought, you know, we want our own car, more people took up driving licenses, that increased, more people bought cars, that increased, more people drove cars. So traffic levels actually went beyond pre-pandemic levels last year in 2021. In this year, so far, they've actually seen it to be less than that amount. So it's already starting to have an impact. So people are driving less. Not that I see too much of that living in London. It's still easy to get locked in a traffic jam if you go out there. But anyway, this is what the stats are saying. So you're thinking, well, does that mean that cars are suddenly now going to get cheaper because the people are getting rid of them and they're not driving anymore? Is that what's happening? Well, no, not really, because the demand is still outstripping supply by a long shot. And these numbers, 4%, 10%, they may seem significant, but when you think of a car park total in the UK of well over 40 million vehicles, it's not that significant. The fact is that prices, for example, used prices of cars are still 32% up compared to used car prices last year. So I mean, that's still a significant jump. And whilst there's been some easing in the used car market, it hasn't actually been a slowdown, and we're not seeing prices come down. And that's primarily because, you know, there's still a problem with the supply of new cars. You know, there's still a waiting list of over a year on some of these cars. So there you go. That's what's happening in the world, and especially here in the UK. But I think it's extending everywhere in the world because of the cost of living. Let me know how the cost of living has affected you. Have you changed your driving habits? Have you changed what you're doing with your car? Are you skimping on maintenance? Will the twice a year MOT thing, or sorry, not twice a year, but once every 2 year MOT thing that the government is proposing, which I don't think is significant, but they seem to think that's going to make a difference. Do you think that's going to make a difference? Are you selling your car? Are you getting rid of your car? Are you going down to a smaller car? Are you doing that? So let me know how it's affecting you in the comments below.
A big shout out and thanks to Jay Williams over at Air Technic, who are top tier sponsors of Brown Car Guy. Check them out at Air Technic Co UK for exhausts, brakes, suspension and body kits. Plus our other major sponsor, Najan Solutions. Much appreciation also to tier 4 sponsors, Muhammad Ali Humaid, Tom Conway Gordon and Reza Adil. And of course all these other guys who supporting on Patreon. Brown Car Guy is eternally grateful. Hey, think about joining them over at patreon.com Brown Car Guy. If you can't, don't worry. Just make sure you're subscribing to the YouTube channel and website. Plus follow on social media by searching for Brown Car Guy.